My dog found a bear cub. What happened next will amaze you. It was a quiet spring morning, the kind where the forest still wears its mist like a blanket. The sun was just beginning to burn through the veil, sending soft rays across the treetops. Birds were stirring, the river nearby whispered with its endless flow, and the world seemed at peace. That was when Max, my loyal shepherd companion of 10 years, darted into the woods. At first, I thought nothing of it. He'd chased squirrels and deer before, always returning with a triumphant bark or a muddy nose. But this time, something was different. Minutes passed. Then half an hour. A prickle of worry ran down my spine. I called his name again and again, my voice echoing through the trees. Silence answered. Just as I was about to grab my boots and search deeper into the forest, the bushes rustled. Out stumbled Max, his fur damp, his paws muddy, his breathing heavy. And in his mouth, something small. Something alive. I froze. My mind could not make sense of it. At first, I thought it was a pup, another stray he'd somehow rescued. But as the creature squirmed, Max carefully laid it at my feet. I saw its tiny rounded ears, its trembling frame, its wide dark eyes staring up at me. A bear cub. So small it couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Its fur was wet and matted, its ribs showing faintly beneath the coat. It whimpered, not in anger, not in threat, but in hunger, in desperation. Max nudged the cub gently, whining as though urging me to help. The cub pressed against his leg as if it already believed the dog was its guardian. I looked around the forest, searching for a mother bear. But the woods gave me nothing. Only silence. Only absence. And in that moment, standing at the edge of my yard with my faithful dog and a trembling cub at my feet, I realized this was not a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something far greater than I could have ever imagined. Carrying the cub inside felt wrong and right all at once. My hands trembled as I wrapped the shivering creature in an old wool blanket. Its body was feather-light, bones pressing against my palms. Its tiny claws clung to the fabric as though it feared the world would abandon it all over again. Max never left its side. He padded close, ears forward, eyes locked on the bundle in my arms. He wasn't just curious. He was protective, watchful, as if he understood that this fragile life was now in our care. I set the cub down in a wooden crate by the fireplace. It whimpered, a sound so thin it barely filled the room. My first instinct was to find food, milk, something soft. With trembling hands, I filled an old baby bottle, warmed the milk, and held it to the cub's mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Its eyes blinked up at me, glazed with exhaustion. Then slowly it latched on. The sound of its tiny slurps filled the silence. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. But even as relief washed over me, the questions crowded in. Where was its mother? Why had Max found it alone in the forest? And most haunting of all, what would happen when its wild nature returned? The cub finished the bottle and curled against the blanket. But it wasn't the fire's warmth it sought. It crawled toward Max, collapsing against his fur with a sigh. Max lowered his head, sniffed the little creature, then rested his chin gently across its back. Man and dog, house and hearth, none of it seemed to matter to the cub. All it knew was that it wasn't alone anymore. That night, I hardly slept. Each time the cub whimpered, Max stirred. Each time I rose to check, the sight was the same. My faithful dog standing guard, his eyes glinting in the firelight, his body curled protectively around the stranger we had welcomed into our home. And in the stillness of that night, I realized something deep, something unspoken. This was no ordinary rescue. It was the birth of a bond. The days that followed unfolded like something out of a dream. What began as a desperate rescue slowly blossomed into the strangest, most beautiful friendship I had ever witnessed. The cub, though fragile at first, grew stronger with each sunrise. Its fur thickened, its eyes brightened, and its steps became steadier. It would stumble across the yard, tumble headfirst into a patch of grass, then climb clumsily onto Max's back as though my old shepherd was nothing more than a moving hill. Max never once complained. He carried the cub gently, nudged it forward when it lagged, even shared his food as though he knew this little stranger needed it more. Soon, the yard was no longer enough. Together, they began to explore the edge of the forest. I would watch from the porch as Max trotted confidently ahead, the cub bounding behind him, swatting at butterflies, sniffing every flower, pawing at fallen logs. Their joy was contagious. Even in my own old age, I found myself laughing like a child at their antics. Sometimes, the cub would tumble into the stream, only to scramble out shaking and sneezing, while Max barked as if scolding him. Other times, the cub would curl up beneath Max's belly during afternoon naps, their breathing rising and falling in perfect unison. Word spread through the town. Neighbors came, some with disbelief, others with awe. "A dog raising a bear," they whispered. "Impossible." But when they saw it with their own eyes, Max standing guard while the cub climbed clumsily up a tree, their skepticism melted into wonder. And I simply watched it all unfold. The loneliness that had once hung over this house was gone. In its place was life, laughter, and a bond that defied every rule of nature. But deep down, a thought lingered. This cub was not meant to stay forever. I could see it in the way its claws grew sharper, the way its instincts flickered in its eyes. Still, for that one golden summer, none of us cared. We lived in the moment. Man, dog, and cub, a family stitched together not by blood, but by love, loyalty, and fate. It was a season I would never forget. A season that made the farewell to come all the harder. By late autumn, the cub was no longer the fragile creature Max had carried home. He was taller now, stronger, his paws leaving deeper prints in the soil. When he reared up on his hind legs, I could see the shadow of the bear he was destined to become. And with that growth came change. I noticed it first in his eyes. Some days, as the wind carried scents from deep within the forest, he would pause, nose lifted, ears twitching. His play would stop. His gaze would turn toward the trees, as though some ancient memory was calling to him. Max felt it too. He would nudge the cub, bark sharply, try to pull his attention back to the yard, back to us. Sometimes it worked. Other times, the cub would wander further than he ever had before, disappearing into the treeline for minutes that stretched like hours. Each time, he returned. But each time, it felt less certain. One evening, as the leaves turned amber and gold, the truth could no longer be ignored. The cub stood at the edge of the forest, eyes fixed on the horizon. He let out a low, uncertain sound, half growl, half whimper. Max rushed to his side, circling him, whining softly, as if pleading with him to stay. I felt the weight of it too, the ache deep in my chest. But I knew what I had to accept. "He doesn't belong to us," I whispered, my voice breaking. "We were only his guardians for a time." The cub looked back at me once, then pressed his head into Max's neck in a gesture that spoke louder than words. Max licked his face, tail wagging, body trembling. And then, he was gone. Through the trees, swallowed by the shadows, the sound of his paws fading into the vast wilderness. The yard felt impossibly empty that night. Max lay by the edge of the forest for hours, eyes fixed where his friend had vanished, refusing to move. And I sat beside him, hand on his back, both of us silent. We knew we had given the cub life. But now, the wild had claimed it back. It happened on a night no one could have prepared for. Summer had returned, dry and relentless. The forest, usually lush and forgiving, had grown brittle under weeks without rain. I remember the first whiff of smoke, faint, almost like someone burning brush. But within hours, the sky glowed red. The fire came fast. Too fast. The crackle of flames roared through the trees as embers rained down like fiery snow. The air turned thick, choking, and the once familiar forest became a monster made of fire and smoke. I grabbed what little I could, calling for Max. His bark echoed back, panicked, sharp. He ran toward me, but in his eyes I saw what he already knew: we were trapped. The fire had circled us. Heat licked at the porch as the flames closed in. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. Max barked furiously, darting toward the treeline, but there was nowhere left to run. And then, through the chaos, a sound. A deep, thunderous roar. At first, I thought the fire itself was making it. But then, through the wall of smoke, a shape emerged. Massive. Dark. Familiar. The cub, no longer small, no longer fragile. A full-grown bear, eyes blazing not with fear but with determination. He barreled through the smoke, crashing against burning branches, clearing a path with sheer force. Max barked wildly, tail thrashing with recognition. I stumbled after them, barely able to breathe, as the bear forged a way forward. We moved as one man, dog, and beast. Every step was agony, every breath a fight. But the bear never faltered. He led us through the inferno, his roars shaking the night, warning the flames themselves to keep back. Finally, we broke free. The forest gave way to the riverbank, its waters shimmering with fire's reflection. We collapsed there, Max panting, my chest heaving, the bear standing tall against the burning sky. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. My eyes filled with tears. The cub I had once held in my arms had returned. And tonight, he had saved me. But before I could speak, before I could even step closer, he turned his head back toward the flames. The wild was still his home. And just as quickly as he had appeared, he vanished once more into the firelit forest. The fire passed, but its memory never left me. The forest grew back, as forests always do, and life settled into its quiet rhythm once more. Max grew older, his muzzle gray, his steps slower. And me. I aged too. The days blurred into years. But I never forgot. There were nights I'd sit by the riverbank, staring into the tree-line, wondering if I had imagined it all. Had the cub really returned that night? Or had the fire and smoke played tricks on my weary mind? Max, though, never doubted. Even in his final years, he would lie by the forest's edge, ears twitching whenever the wind carried a sound from within. As if he knew, and was simply waiting. When Max passed, the silence in the house was unbearable. For the first time in decades, I was truly alone. No paw steps across the floor, no warm body curled at my feet. Just echoes of a bond that had once defied the wild itself. And then, it happened. It was spring. I was 79, walking slowly along the river with a cane in hand. The air was crisp, the world alive with birdsong. That's when I heard it, a rustling heavy and deliberate, from the other side of the water. I froze. From the shadows of the trees, he emerged. A bear, massive, scarred, but unmistakable. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that shook me to my core. Recognition. He stepped closer to the water's edge, his movements calm, deliberate. For a heartbeat, the years melted away. I was no longer an old man with trembling hands. I was the caretaker once more, staring at the cub I had fed by the fire, the one who had followed Max, who had vanished into the forest, who had returned to save me. He stood there for what felt like eternity. Then slowly he dipped his head, not in threat, but in something that felt eerily like respect. And just as quickly as he had come, he turned and disappeared back into the trees. I never saw him again. But that single moment was enough. Enough to know that the bond we had shared had not been lost to time, nor to the wild. That love once given is never forgotten, not by man, not by dog, not even by a creature born of the forest. Some promises last a lifetime. And some friendships, against all odds, never truly end.